भगवान की जय। जय निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, Chapter 14, Pregnancy of Deity in the Evening, Text number 1. Shri Shuka Uvacha Nisamyakaushara Vinopavarnitam Nishamyakaushara Vinopavarnitam Hare Katham Karama Sukara Atmana Hare Katham Karana Sukara Atmana Punasapraprachatam Udyatanjalir Punasapaprachatam Udyatanjalir Nachati tripto viduro dridhavrataha Nachati tripto viduro dridhavrataha Shisuka vacha Nisamyakaushara Vinopavarnitam Hare Katham Karana Sukara Atmanaha Punasapaprachatam Udyatanjalir Nachati tripto viduro dhitavrataha Shisuka vacha Nisamyakaushara Vinopavarnitam Hare Katham Karana Sukara Atmanaha Punasapaprachatam Udyatanjalir Nachati tripto viduro dhitavrataha Shisuka vacha Samyakaushara Vinopavarnitam Hare Katham Karana Sukara Atmanaha Punasapaprachatam Udyatanjalir Nachati tripto viduro dhridavrataha Shisuka vacha Nisamyakaushara Vinopavarnitam Hare Katham Karana Sukara Atmanaha Punasapraprachatam Udyatanjalir Nachati tripto viduro dhridavrataha Shisuka uvacha Nisamyakaushara Vinopavarnitam Hare Katham Karana Sukara Atmanaha Punasapaprachatam Udyatanjalir Nachati tripto viduro dhridavrataha Shri Shuka Uvacha Nishamya Koshara Vinopavarnitam Hare Katam Karna Sukhara Atmanaha Punasapapracha Utam Udyatanjali Nachati Tripto Viduro Drita Vrataha. Word for word, Shri Shuka Uvacha. Shri Shukadev Goswami said, Nisamya, after hearing, Kaushara Vina, by the sage Maitreya, Upavarnitam, described, Harehe, of the personality of Godhead, Katham, narrations, Karana, for the reason of lifting the earth, Shukara Atmanaha, of the boar incarnation, Punaha, again, Saha, he, Prapacha, inquired, Tam, from him, Maitreya, Udyata Anjalihi, with folded hands, Na, never, Cha, also, Atitriptaha, very much satisfied, Viduraha, Vidura, Dritavrataha, taken to a vow. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Sukadev Goswami said, after hearing from the great sage Maitreya about the Lord's incarnation as Varaha, Vidura, who had taken a vow, begged him with folded hands to please narrate further transcendental activities of the Lord, since he, Vidura, did not yet feel satisfied. There's no purport, so we'll go to text 2. Vidura uvacha tenevatu muni shreshta harina yagna murtina adi daityo hiranyaksho hata iti anushushurma. Translation. Sri Vidura said, O chief amongst the great sages, I have heard by disciplic succession that Hiranyaksha, the original demon, was slain by the same form of sacrifices the personality of Godhead Lord bore. Purport. As referred to previously, the boar incarnation was manifested in 2 millenniums, namely Swayambhuva and Chakshusha. In both millenniums there was a boar incarnation of the Lord, but in the Swayambhuva millennium he lifted the earth from within the water of the universe, whereas in the Chakshusha millennium he killed the first demon, Hiranyaksha. In the Swayambhuva millennium he assumed the color white, and in the Chakshusha millennium he assumed the color red. Vidura had already heard about one of them, and he proposed to hear about the other. The 2 different boar incarnations described are the one, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Om Jnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pongam langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Paramanand Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. So we've finished hearing about the sages glorifying the appearance of Lord Varaha in the Swayambhuv millennium, or the appearance of Swayambhuv Manu. Now just quickly, I wanted to check, in the previous chapter, it's mentioned actually by Maitreya himself that he killed the demon within the water, Daityam. So it's mentioned in text 31 and 32. But here we see Vidura talking about how he heard by disciplic succession that Hiranyaksha, the original demon, was slain by Varahadev. So we can see here that Vidura is trying to churn the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that begins by understanding the details of the pastime of the Personality of Godhead. As Prabhupada said, it's not enough just to know God is great. It is more important to know how great He is. So it's the details, and it's in the details where we'll find, often they say that the devil is in the details. So in today's details, there's the devil, or the demon Hiranyaksha. The Adi Daityo, it's translated as the original demon, but, he is the original demon. But if you have a look at the Sanskrit, Adi Daityo, he's the original, descendant of Diti and Kasyapa. He's the first one, Daitya. And as you read Srimad Bhagavatam, there's different words signifying demons, like Danavas, those who came from, it's mentioned, I forgot the name of their mother, but she's also a co-wife of Diti. So you have the Daityas, the Danavas, and you have various other lineages of demons. So then you can understand that, as Krishna says, that dvau sarga lokesmin deva ashura evacha, that in this material world there are two types of living entities. One is the devas, and one are the demons. In another place it's mentioned the devas are those who worship and remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whereas the demons are the ones who go against Him. So this is the definition of the demons and the demigods. And you can see here that Hiranyaksha really went against Lord Vishnu. He in fact challenged Lord Vishnu. Because as you read in the later half of this chapter and the next chapter, Hiranyaksha was traveling the whole universe trying to find someone to beat up, because no one was there to match his prowess. And we see that example of dhamba, or pride, excessive arrogance, in the worshipper of Lord Shiva, Banasur, yes. And how Banasur got from Lord Shiva thousands of hands, and he used those hands to pacify Lord Shiva by beating the drum when Lord Shiva was dancing the Tandava Nitya. And being pleased with Banasur pleaded his case to Lord Shiva, saying that, look, you're giving me so many arms, I'm trying to fight people and they all run away or they get defeated. And out of the itch to fight, I'm fighting mountains and destroying them with my hands. So please let me find someone who I can, fight with. Because otherwise it seems that this benediction you've given me is quite useless and troublesome. And Lord Shiva, understanding this pride of his worshipper, becomes a little irritated and tells him that, look, you'll find someone who's going to defeat you. And we see later in the pastimes that Lord Krishna himself comes and defeats Bhanasur. But under Lord Shiva's, pleading that Krishna just cut off most of his hand and left him with 4. Right? 4 hands were left. So Lord Krishna there cut down Bhanasur's pride. in that way. So in the same way, Hiranyaksha, he defeats his pride by killing him altogether. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead is equal to all, in the sense that whoever comes in contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they benefit. There's no such thing as the Lord being partial with living entities. He gives them all benefit whatsoever. So for as Prabhupada says, the Krishna's dancing with the gopis and Krishna's killing on the battlefield, they're both of the same transcendental nature. And we'll read that in the next verse and purport coming up, either tomorrow or the day after, how foolish people consider the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the subject matter of the Bhagavad Gita, to be inferior to that of the Rasa Lila. But Prabhupada mentions that actually for the transcendentals who's perfectly situated, both are of the same transcendental nature and both are equally relishable. And Prabhupada quotes the evidence of Bhishma Dev, saying that anyone who was there on the battlefield that were watching or participating in the killing of Arjuna and Krishna, when they were being killed by Arjuna and Krishna, just by taking darshan of the Lord, they were being purified. They were liberated. And anyone who watched the Rasa Lila, they were also being liberated, purified. Because it's mentioned, Tat vikrididam vajavadu biritam cha Vishnu Shraddha anashunayad atavarnayadya bhaktim param bhagavati patilabdha kamam hridvag hridrog asvapanoti achirena diraha. That the hridroga, the disease within the heart, mainly lust, is vanquished simply by hearing about the pastimes of the young cowherd girls with Lord Krishna. But that needs to be heard from a bona fide source. It needs to be heard from a acharya in the line of the disciplic succession. Prabhupada was explaining, I was reading a lila on Prabhupada lila, the pastimes online. And Prabhupada was explaining to one of his disciples that you see in Vrindavan, the whole idea is to completely reduce eating, sleeping, mating, and defending whatsoever. Whether you perform sex illicitly or licitly, nothing should be performed in Vrindavan. Everything should be just for the pleasure of Krishna, and everything should be minimized just for service to Krishna. But then Prabhupada takes a heavier route in his teaching his disciples. And he tells them that in Vrindavan, unfortunately, many unscrupulous men have commented on the Rasa Lila and the Bhagavad Gita and all of these things, and they take to this path of debauchery. And unfortunately, they, in the name of trying to be devotees of Krishna, in the name of that, they practice sinful illicit activities. And Prabhupada mentions there that the problem is that they are taking Krishna's activities and they're twisting it for their own purposes. So this is what we call exploiting Krishna's words. If you're going to take Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita in introduction, if you're going to take Krishna's words, you should take everything. None of this half-hard, half knowledge. What does Prabhupada call it? Arda kutkudi nyaya. The half hen logic. The one day one farmer thought, look, I have such a nice hen producing so many nice eggs, but I have to feed the hen. So I think it'll be more economically or more efficient if I cut the head off the chicken and let it just continue producing eggs. That way I don't have to feed it, and that way the eggs will continue to come. So does that sound sane? Does it sound logical? No, it doesn't. Because the hen will die and that's the end of the egg manufacture. So therefore, Prabhupada says if you want the benefit, the actual result of reading Bhagavad Gita, we accept whatever Krishna says in toto, in full. So in the same way, when we understand Krishna's pastimes, he's killing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and he's, as Prabhupada says, loving the gopis, or embracing the gopis. They're both of the same transcendental nature. Both parties are being benefited. Now, here in the verse, the whole, later portion of the previous chapter is dedicated to glorifying Lord Varahadev. And the main thing here of the prayers of Lord Varahadev is explaining his transcendental nature. Because immediately when we think Lord Boar, we think, boar, dirty, lowly, all of those inferior qualities and characteristics. But they're glorifying the Lord as Yagya Murti, Yagna Murtina, the form of sacrifice. The whole purpose of sacrifice, when one becomes qualified to perform sacrifice, when one takes second initiation. And second initiation, the upavitta, or the accepting of the sacred thread, indicates one entering into pure life, a pure way of living, the mode of goodness. And when one performs sacrifices for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, everything is immaculate, everything is clean, everything is ready for the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So therefore, they're equating the Lord to that, His form, to the form of sacrifices. So you can understand the transcendental nature of the Lord's body. And here, Vidura is mentioning here that form of personalities defeated Hiranyaksha. Why? What was the reason? Why should he come and defeat Hiranyaksha, who is a demon of a lowly character in this material world? But I've heard this because I've heard Anushushuma. I've heard it from previous authorities. So hearing about Krishna from authorities is extremely important, because we hear that Janma karma cha me divyam evam yoveti tattvataha. That if we hear about the pastimes and the birth and the activities of the Lord, and we understand their transcendental nature, then we'll never take birth in this world again. And which is very important, because that's the purpose of our life. Our important purpose of life is to extricate ourselves or liberate ourselves from material nature and enter into the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Personality Godhead. And that requires some effort on our part. As Prabhupada mentioned, as Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajante antakalevaram. That at the end of life, if we want to enter into the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or come to Him, then we must dedicate our lives to practicing Krishna consciousness. Because at the end of life, when we are about to die, Kapila Dev says that we experience pain equivalent to 10,000 times the pain of a scorpion, 10,000 times the pain of a scorpion's sting on the body. And it's mentioned the scorpion's sting on the body is extremely painful. The whole idea there is that where is the impetus to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead when you're experiencing such pain, if you haven't prepared your whole life for it. So throughout our whole life, there will be ups and downs, ins and outs, obstacles, opportunities of elation, opportunities for depression. But our goal is to always remain Krishna conscious. The routine activities continue going on for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And by doing so, whenever we meet an obstacle in the future, we know how to react. As it's mentioned that when we, Radhanath Maharaj mentions it in this way, we have a lower nature and a higher nature. They're like the good dog and the bad dog. The more and more attention we give to the bad dog, the lower nature, the less and less healthy the good dog or the higher nature is. So in other words, the more and more we succumb to our lower nature and perform acts of sense gratification for our senses, the less and less we'll be able to make the right decision to serve Krishna. Another way of saying it is that we have like a choice muscle. It's like a muscle. You want a strong muscle, you have to continuously train the muscle. So in the same way, we have to continuously train the mind to follow the correct path. Yeah, so in this sense, in that way, we want to develop the constant remembrance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that begins by hearing. Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita, again, introduction. It's a fantastic summary of the whole Krishna conscious philosophy. If at all you're at loss at what you're reading, what you're doing, what's the purpose, if you just simply read that introduction, Prabhupada systematically takes you step by step through the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness. There Prabhupada's mentioning that you have to just simply hear. You want to know about Krishna, then you simply just follow the Vedic literatures. Actually, humans have the tendency to want to hear, to want to know, to want to understand about different things and activities of different people. And we have this tendency to read. But unfortunately, we use this reading for understanding subject matter of a mundane quality. Newspapers, so on and so forth. So therefore, Vyasadeva has specifically written so many different Vedic literature just to capture the attention of the human beings and to engage their time in understanding about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore Prabhupada has taken in that mood and taken it forward and given us so many of his works, so many of his books, so that we can understand Krishna more and more and more. And that way this smaran muktva kalevaram, that at the time of death we'll be able to remember Krishna more and more. And so therefore this whole idea of anushushma, we must hear from the authorities, is very important. Later on, again, in this section, you'll hear about the qualities of which endeared Vidura, Maitreya to Vidura, in the sense that Maitreya felt obliged to give more and more understanding to Vidura. And it's mentioned that Vidura was faithful and inquisitive to hear. So this is very important qualities that we hear in Srimad Bhagavatam. It seems like throughout Srimad Bhagavatam we hear pastimes, prayers, and then suddenly in between there seems to be this transition between. And this transition we seem to take very cheaply. That okay, it's just a transmission, you're kind of like an intermission, take a break, it's okay, it's good, now the next pastime, next prayers. But actually this is the foundation in which the prayers, the glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is given to us by Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a constant remembrance of see the mood and see the characteristics, see the internal workings of the Vaishnavas as they hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if you're able to develop that, then naturally you'll be able to feel the same way Vidura's feeling, that you will beg to hear more and more about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You won't beg that please let Bhagavatam class finish so that I can take prasad. You'll be praying more and more, let us hear more from the devotee. And it doesn't matter who will be sitting on the Vyasasana. For such an inquisitive, for such a attentive devotee, they'll be eager to hear about the Personality of Godhead from anyone and everyone. Because they will know that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is an individual. And all his parts and parcels are individuals. And each one of them relate to Krishna in an individual, unique way. And by hearing from the devotee, sometimes in their glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that mood will slip. They will give a glimpse into their relationship with Krishna, their appreciation of Krishna's qualities. And by hearing that, we can even develop more appreciation for that devotee, more appreciation for Krishna. And the more and more appreciation we have for Radha Gopinath, the more and more grateful we are to them, and the more and more we want to engage in their service. So therefore, these simple qualities of submissive hearing, simple qualities of being inquisitive, faithful, simple qualities that we hear of the Vaishnavas, these are the core foundations of our practicing of Krishna consciousness. Because if you think about it, why are we performing Krishna consciousness? What's the main purpose? Prabhupada says, look, you are an insignificant living entity. You are a servant of Krishna. Your duty is to render immediate service to Lord Krishna. And Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So very simple, we must engage in service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And service means not according to our desires and our convenience. Service means for the pleasure of the other party, which means we will take up inconvenience for them. How strong our conviction is, what pushes us forward is individual, is unique for each individual person. Everyone takes inspiration from Krishna in a different way. And everyone is, by hearing from them, we're able to see different aspects of Krishna. And hear about his transcendental qualities in a different light, in a different perspective. And that's the whole reason Prabhupada instituted this Srimad Bhagavatam class. During, I think it was 1972, around that time, Prabhupada instituted Bhagavatam class throughout all of his ISKCON centers. Prior to that, all devotees did was they would come together, they would open a book of Prabhupada's, and they would read it together and they'd move on. There was no one technically giving a class. But Prabhupada instituted this whole Bhagavatam class because he wanted Bhagavatam and the philosophy of Krishna consciousness to be heard, but to be understood from different angles of vision, perspectives, to be analyzed, and in that way devotees would become more and more strong in their understanding of Krishna consciousness. And as Prabhupada says, that how do we remain Krishna conscious? Well, the example given by the acharyas is that a wife who has a lover will constantly think of the lover, but will perform their duties very meticulously so that they won't be caught. So in the same way, Prabhupada says, one performs their material duties very, very strictly for the pleasure of Krishna, but always thinking of Krishna. And Prabhupada says how to do it? It must be developed. This love must be reawakened from within the heart. And that begins, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Jeto Darpana Marjanam. That begins by chanting, hearing and chanting the holy names of the Lord. And how do we know these things? It comes again, Anushushama. It comes from the disciplic succession. Prabhupada says that the disciplic succession is the spiritual technology. You're interested in technology, you're interested in the latest gadget. The latest spiritual gadget eternally is the parampara system, the disciplic succession. Because by their mercy we'll be able to understand Krishna. There's a verse that in the Rig Veda, it's mentioned that the learned sages, the realized souls, they're able to see the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they're able to impart that vision onto their faithful followers. And Prabhupada, when Prabhupada was asked about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada says, what can I say? He was a Vaikuntha man. Right? So, today is the appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai. And we can see from the beginning of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's pastimes, we can see how he presented Krishna consciousness in a very innovative, a very urgent fashion, in a very important way. In fact, it's mentioned that Bhaktivinoda Thakur, before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had come, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had prayed to the Supreme Personality Godhead that there's so much work to be done and that I'm only one person. And so therefore he would pray to the Supreme Personality Godhead that please send me a ray of Vishnu. Please send me someone of your own associates to help me expand. And so therefore Krishna sent Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to this world. And it's our great fortune that we are in the line of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It's mentioned that when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had appeared in this world, then at that time the Rath Yatra parade was happening. This is when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was living in Puri. And as the procession was passing through their front house, the Rath stopped. And Jagannath wouldn't move. As we see in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in that time also the Rath didn't move. So in that predicament, many people were trying. But then the mother of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur took the opportunity that I can go and present my son to the lotus feet of Lord Jagannath. And so when she offered her son to the lotus feet of Lord Jagannath, it's mentioned that the garland fell on the child. The garland fell from the deity on the child. And you can hear a similar example, Baladev Vijayabhushan, when he went to Jaipur to establish Gaudiya Vaishnavism, then it's mentioned that Govindaji gave him his garland. It's mentioned when Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami went to the Madan Mohan deity, the Pujari gave the garland of the deities. And in that way the Vaishnava understood that this was a blessing and a confirmation from the Lord to perform the activities. So and therefore in that way we can understand that Lord Jagannath indicated the appearance of a great Vaishnava, a Mahabhagavata. So we can see in the pastimes of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was known as the Simha Guru, the Lion Guru, that although he had within him, or he had displayed all qualities of a Mahabhagavata, all the ecstatic emotions, still when it came to preaching, he was extremely forthright, he was extremely uncompromising, to the extent that whenever he used to walk down the streets, that if any impersonalist or any other mental speculator saw him, they'd immediately walk in the different direction, because they knew that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wouldn't tolerate that and they would immediately smash them. So in that way they would escape. In another pastime, Jananivas Prabhu mentions that on a train ride, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur happened to meet a Mayavadi, happened to see a group of Mayavadis. And he saw their their leader, their guru. And at that time, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had somehow or other in his possession a box of mangoes. But due to the train ride and the heat, the mangoes were going bad. So therefore, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told one of his disciples that you go and give this box to the Mayavadis. And you tell them that they should eat it and honor it. My spiritual master has given it to you. And so the disciple was thinking, why is he asking to give this? And he says, no, you should go and give them. Because according to their philosophy, everything is one. So whether it's ripe, unripe, or completely ripe and useless, they should eat it. And so for this disciple went and gave it to the Mayavadi Guru and his disciples and explained. And the Mayavadi Guru couldn't say anything or do anything. Completely smashed just by giving mango. So there also another pastime of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is that he, at one point, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was invited to come and preach, explain how anyone from any birth could be elevated to the platform of being a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thereby establish their position as higher than Brahmanas. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur had unfortunately fell ill on that particular day. And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur volunteered to go on his behalf, and he went there and he preached so successfully that everyone accepted whatever he said verbatim. Of course, there were those who were caste Brahmanas, caste Goswamis, who later on continuously caused harassment, to the extent that once when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had gone on parikrama in Vrindavan with his disciples, there at one particular point in time, they had sent dacoits to kill him. They had sent, even before that, when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was driving through or he was going through a particular section, they had arranged boulders and rocks to be thrown from that particular mountain face to kill him. Someone had hired gundas and rogues and dacoits to kill Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It's mentioned caste Goswamis, those who are against the whole idea that anyone of any birth can come to the platform of Vaishnavism, which transcends Brahmana, the standard or the mode of goodness of Brahmanas. Because, for them it's a business in one sense. You're born in a Brahmana family, you're qualified to be a Brahmana, and therefore you monopolize that position. So therefore you can extort the population for your own gratification. So in this instance in the Vrindavan, the Braja Parikrama, one of his disciples told his spiritual master that, Guru Maharaj, you give me your cloth and you take my cloth and you can escape. And it's mentioned that in this way Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had to escape from these dacoits that had been hired to kill. So in this way Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was met with opposition. He was met with obstacles. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was uncompromising. One time one of his disciples, he had sent him to help other disciples in a particular place. And when the devotee that had requested help came back to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and he said, Guru Maharaj, we're very happy that you've sent help, but this particular brahmachari that you've sent, he's causing such havoc that in that particular place there was a particular guru that they had all found worship or found some sort of qualities and respectable nature in him. And so therefore they were holding on to him as being very of a high nature. But this disciple, following his spiritual master's footsteps, was preaching very uncompromisingly in that area, to the extent it caused agitation amongst the people. And so when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur heard this, he was extremely pleased. He said, he's doing the right thing, let him go on. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur knew what was important. He knew at the right place, right time, what's right circumstance, what needed to be taken up and what needed to be compromised. So in the sense that he knew the principle of Yukta Vairagya in and out, 100%. To the extent that he had kept the printing press within the temple room. And the printing press at that time made so much noise, mechanical noise. It was, it's like a very loud machine. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told his disciples that actually this is nectar for the ears of Krishna. This is nectar for the ears of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because it's printing the glories continuously. It's mentioned that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had 3 printing presses. Can anyone guess where these 3 printing presses were? I'm saying, look, yeah, in the temple room, of course, but where? Around in Calcutta, that's one. Kolkata now? Wrong. Not Mumbai. Not Puri, no. Actually, Krishnanagar, that's in Mayapur. That's the second. And the third one you'll never guess. Even I never guessed. It was in Madras, Chennai. So he had in those 3 places. And in those 3 temples he had printing. And one lecture Prabhupada actually mentions in Mayapur that one governor or one high minister of Bengal had visited Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in Mayapur and told him that, they had told him that, our Guru Maharaj, he's printing, such and such newspaper and it's a daily. And the minister was so surprised. How are you able to do this? Where are you getting the subject matter from? And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told this person that, you see, if one insignificant small city is able to print 5 daily newspapers, then how much more should we print to continuously glorify and expand the ever-fresh activities of the spiritual world? So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's mood was that there should be so many different periodicals being printed, continuously glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To the extent that even a brahmachari went out and printed and distributed one, as Prabhupada says, Paisa magazine, small coin, Paisa magazine. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was so pleased upon him that yes, you are doing the right thing, and because of you, this movement is being expanded. And in this particular day, it's the appearance day, I'll wrap up here, the appearance day of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. It's mentioned that the disappearance and the appearance day of the Vaisnava, they're both causes of celebration, and they're both opportunities to pray directly to them. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur set the standard of what our prayers should be. And our prayers to the Vaishnavas and to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, of course we pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but we hear from even great personalities like Lord Shiva that the Supreme Personality of Godhead takes greater pleasure in us worshipping His devotees. So by worshipping the devotees, by praying to them, we're actually pleasing Krishna, we're pleasing Radha Gopinath more and more. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says our nature of our prayer should be that we are begging the Vaishnava to make us more attached to the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To give up the attachment to house, money, family, all of those things, and to become more and more attached to Krishna's loving devotional service. So our prayer to the Simha Guru, the Lion Guru today, could be of that nature. Oh, and one point on Yukta Vairagya, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was criticized. Again, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was uncompromising, which means he was constantly being criticized. But he did not care for dogs barking. Just as we walk down the street, dog barks, we don't care. We continue with our work. In the same way, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, knowing the priority, knowing what needs to be done, he did not care for all these people criticizing him. He sent his disciples overseas. He sent some of his sannyasis. Technically, sannyasis don't take any conveyances, any transport. They simply walk from one place to the other and live a simple life. He had sannyasis go overseas. He had the same sannyasis wear tailored kurtas and coats. The same sannyasis that went there were preaching Krishna consciousness. In fact, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had 64 matas or centers in India, and he had a center in Burma, and he had a center in Germany. In one lecture, Prabhupada says that he even spoke to one of his German disciples and said, actually by nature your Germans are very stocky and well built by nature, how come you're thin and lean? He said during the war we were rationed, so all the children at that time only took small amounts of food. So Prabhupada is explaining that his spiritual master had a German disciple. Another place in Burma, when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had visited there, when they cooked in ghee, all the people started complaining of the smell. But there in Burma, the way they worked was outside their homes, they would have a pot. And in that pot, they would put all of the leftover meat and any other living entity that had died in that area in that pot to ferment out the front. And they would eat that as a delicacy or a addition to all their meals. And that smell was putrid and horrifying. Compared to that, they're complaining ghee, the smell of clarified butter being cooked, being so horrible. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was mentioning that, just see how fallen they are. That they're taking that which is obnoxious to be very sweet, and that which is meant to be, that is very sweet, to be obnoxious. So therefore, anyway, so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had many centers, and his principle Yukta Vairagya was there. But the most appreciable, or the most recognized contribution that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave us was Srila Prabhupada. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gave us the association of Srila Prabhupada. Even today, I think today is the inauguration or the opening of the Ultadanga temple, the first place where Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Prabhupada met. So it's the opening of that particular place in honor of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Prabhupada's meeting. And so therefore we can pray to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and we can thank him for allowing us to have the association of his most beloved disciple Srila Prabhupada. And we can pray to him that we can be always strict and uncompromising in devotional service, that we may also not fall away from practicing devotional service strictly in the name of Yukta Vairagya, and that we may be able to become more and more useful in Srila Prabhupada's hand in preaching the Krishna consciousness movement. So I'll end there. It's already 8:50. Oh, questions are there. Okay, we'll have 2 questions.
Just going back to that point about you're making the scorpion bites 10,000 times at the time of death. So Bhakti Shakti Mataji in Vrindavan is explaining that the Kaviraj visited Srila Prabhupada on his deathbed and saw there was no visible sign of pain. So essentially, is it only the Uttamadikari Nitya Siddha who has that no feeling of pain at the time of death? Or is there other opportunities for perhaps nearby devotees, Madhyamadikaris, to experience that freedom from pain at the time of death?
Well, it's mentioned that Vaishnavas take death as just a portal, an opportunity for more devotional service. And for one who's absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and hearing and chanting His glories, then naturally one is not affected by the waves of material existence. So pain, lamentation, hunger, they don't affect such a devotee. But as we see in the case of Jayananda Thakur, and how he left his body in excruciating pain, actually, he's suffering from leukemia. And to the extent he actually worked himself to a very precarious situation for the service of Srila Prabhupada and the Ratha Yatra. And it's mentioned that although he was in so much pain, devotees were there around him chanting very loudly in his ear. So by the mercy of the devotees, regardless of our position, by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by the mercy of the devotees, we'll always get that. Even though we may go through pain, whether we go through pain or not, our position is that we are very fallen, and by the mercy of the devotee, by the mercy of the Lord, by the mercy of our spiritual master, that we'll be able to engage in devotional service after this. We let go of this body. So, yes, by nature, the Kanishta Adhikari is simply thinking of their own bhakti. They're not considering the Vaishnavas. So, to the extent of their feeling pain, I'm not too sure. But we know of the Uttamadikari and the Madhyamadikari's platform of being transcendental to all of that. Otherwise the Uttamadikari wouldn't preach because of their nature of strong tolerance. So I can't comment on that aspect, but I can tell for certain that regardless of what situation you're in, by citing the example of Jayananda Thakur and other Vaishnavas who've passed, by the mercy of the Lord, by the mercy of the Vaishnavas, they'll help us remember Krishna at the time of death. In fact, it's mentioned the Lord Himself won't forget the devotee. He'll make sure that the devotee goes to the right place at the right time. Okay. Thank you.
Who's the personality of whom we do not have heard about Hiranyaksha as mentioned?
Well, if you think about it, Vyasadeva is his father. I think that pretty much sums it up. Vyasadeva is his father. Vyasadeva, through a Shudrani, begot Vidura. And the Kurus got constant association of Vyasadeva because Satyavati was the mother of Vyasadeva. And so Vyasadeva had given her the benediction that whenever she wanted him, she just immediately had to remember him and meditate on him and he'd appear. And constantly throughout the Mahabharata, you'll see Vyasadeva appearing, giving counsel. Constantly giving counsel. And you can understand Vidura as Yamaraj himself. So he would have heard from so many different sources the same thing. In fact, you don't know how many times he's heard the same pastime. But see how inquisitive, enthusiastic, and faithful Vidura is. So I can't put a name to it, but I can tell you for certain that he would have heard from Vyasadeva. Okay, we'll end here. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki jai. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Avirbhav ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande Hare Hare Bo. Oh, just quickly, we're celebrating the appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur here in the temple. We'll have the Pushpanjali here at 11. Hare Krishna.